8 years ago, I was 2 weeks away from signing a marriage license. The dress was bought. The guests were invited. And I almost made the worst decision of my entire life. By the end of this, you'll understand why walking away was the bravest thing I ever did. And why the fifth reason is the one nobody ever sees coming. My name is Eleanor. I'm 79 years old, and I live alone in a small house in Asheville, North Carolina. My husband of 44 years, Thomas, passed away on a cold February morning. Heart attack. Quick. The kind of death people call merciful. And for a while I agreed. But mercy doesn't fill a quiet kitchen at 7 a.m. It doesn't sit across from you at dinner. It doesn't answer when you talk to yourself just to hear a voice. The loneliness after Thomas died was the heaviest thing I've ever carried. And I was not prepared for how quickly other people would try to fix it for me. Reason 1. The financial trap nobody warns you about. A woman named Patricia, 71, from Phoenix, Arizona, thought she'd found steadiness again. Her second husband seemed comfortable. Owned a car, owned a home, talked about travel and shared expenses. What she didn't know was that he owed $47,000 in medical debt from a cancer treatment 2 years before they met. She found out 8 months into the marriage, when a collections notice arrived addressed to both of them. Both of them. Because the moment she signed that marriage license, his debt legally became hers. According to the National Center for Family and Marriage Research, women over 60 who remarry face a significantly higher financial risk than their male counterparts, largely because women are more likely to have fixed retirement incomes with little room to absorb unexpected debt. Patricia's savings, built across 4 decades of careful work, began draining within the year. Her credit score dropped. She borrowed against her home. Within 3 years, the retirement she planned was gone. When I heard a version of Patricia's story from my friend Helen, it was her sister. I went cold. Because I hadn't asked. I hadn't asked the man I was about to marry anything real about his finances. He seemed stable. Seemed and is are not the same word. I called a financial advisor that week. She told me plainly, remarriage after 60 is one of the largest financial risks a woman can take, because it is voluntary and nearly irreversible. His debts become yours. His medical costs can drain your savings. And if he dies first, his children can legally contest your shared assets. Ask questions before you sign anything. Ask about debt. Ask about his children's financial situations. Ask about what his will currently says. These are not unromantic questions. They are survival questions. You protect what you've built, she told me. Not because you're suspicious, but because you've earned the right to be careful. That conversation rattled something loose in me. But I wasn't ready to call off the wedding yet. Not quite. Reason 2. You finally found yourself, and marriage will ask you to disappear again. For the first time in my adult life after Thomas died, I was living on my own terms. I ate breakfast at whatever hour I wanted. I rearranged furniture on a Tuesday afternoon for no reason. I read novels until midnight and felt no guilt about the lamp still burning. Small things, but they were entirely mine. My friend Dorothy had remarried at 72. I visited her one afternoon, maybe 4 months before my own wedding. She looked tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. We had tea and she said something quietly, almost to herself. I just miss having my own schedule. He gets anxious when I'm gone. Says I'm choosing my friends over him. I thought I was getting a companion. I got someone who needs to know where I am every hour. Research from the Gerontological Society of America has found that women over 65 report significantly lower personal autonomy in remarried households compared to widows living independently, and that loss of autonomy correlates with measurable increases in depression and anxiety among older women. Dorothy wasn't unhappy with her husband exactly. He was, as she kept saying, a good man. But goodness doesn't automatically mean space. It doesn't mean freedom. And at 72, she was right back to managing someone else's emotional weather, apologizing for afternoons spent with her daughter, shrinking herself to fit a life built around his comfort. I drove home from that visit and sat in my kitchen for a long time. I thought about who I was becoming slowly, quietly, since Thomas died. I was starting to find out. And the thought of giving that up, of handing that half-discovered self back over to couplehood, felt like a loss I hadn't anticipated. Practical step. Before any remarriage decision, spend at least 1 full year living independently. Not dating. Not merging. Living. Learn what you actually want in a day. That knowledge will be the most honest guide you have. Reason 3. Your children will bear the legal consequences. My daughter Carol sat across from me at lunch, a week before the wedding. She picked at her salad and couldn't quite look at me. Finally she said, "Mom, what happens to the house if you die first?" I didn't have a good answer. I spoke to an estate attorney the following day. He explained, without softening it, that a spouse has legal rights that supersede a will. If I died, the man I married would have spousal claims that could override what I intended to leave my children. They could spend years in probate court. They could lose. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Financial Planning found that adult children from first marriages lose an estimated 30 to 50% of expected inheritance when a surviving parent remarries, often due to spousal claims and contested estates. Eleanor, that's me, sat with that number for 3 days. This wasn't my children being greedy. This was them watching the possibility of losing their father's legacy, and then their mother's, to someone they'd known for 7 months. It's not about the money, Carol had said at that lunch. It's about becoming strangers in a family we've always belonged to. A prenuptial agreement can offer some protection. So can specific estate planning with an attorney who specializes in blended family law. But even with those tools in place, the legal entanglement of remarriage creates risk that cannot be entirely eliminated. Know what you are signing before you sign it. I want to pause here, because by this point 3 reasons in, I was sitting with a lot. The financial risk, the loss of self, my daughter's face at that lunch, and I still hadn't canceled anything. I kept telling myself these were fears, not reasons, that love or something like it would smooth over the details. I was wrong. And the next 2 reasons are why. Reason 4. You may spend your last good years as a caregiver. A woman named Ruth, 69, from Columbus, Ohio, remarried a man named Frank who was active, traveled, played golf twice a week. 2 years later, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. By the 3rd year, Ruth was helping him dress, managing medications, cutting his food, driving to appointments 3 times a week. She was 72 years old and she was exhausted in a way that had no bottom. I visited her one afternoon. Frank was resting. She made tea with hands that weren't quite steady and said, "I thought I was getting someone to share life with. I didn't know I was signing up for this. And I can't leave. I promised." The statistics are sobering. According to the National Alliance for Caregiving, women over 65 provide an average of 34 hours of informal caregiving per week when a spouse becomes ill. Nearly a full-time job, unpaid and unrelenting. And the health consequences for female caregivers are well documented. Higher rates of depression, immune suppression, and earlier mortality. I had already cared for Thomas through his final years. 2 years of watching him fade nearly took me with him. The thought of beginning that again for someone I'd known less than a year was something my body understood before my mind did. Practical step. Before remarrying, have an honest conversation about health history. His and yours. Ask about his long-term care insurance, if any. Ask what the plan is if either of you becomes seriously ill. If there is no plan, that silence is itself an answer. Reason 5. You are doing it for the wrong reasons. This is the one I didn't expect. This is the one that finally made me pick up the phone and call off the wedding. I sat down one night 2 weeks before the date and I asked myself a single question. Why am I doing this? The answer was not love. It was not passion. It wasn't even companionship, not really. The honest answer was because everyone told me I should. Because living alone had started to feel like a kind of failure. Because somewhere deep in the story I'd been told about women, alone equaled wrong. Research from the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research found that older women remarry at significantly lower rates than men after widowhood. And when surveyed, the primary reason cited by women who chose not to remarry was not grief or unavailability, it was preference. They preferred their independence. They had simply learned, often for the first time in their lives, what they actually wanted. I had been taught across 7 decades that a woman without a man was incomplete. That independence was a consolation prize. That dying alone was the worst outcome. But those were not truths. They were habits. Old, inherited, unexamined habits. The truth was simpler and quieter. I liked living alone. I liked waking up to a morning that was entirely my own. I liked becoming, slowly and imperfectly, someone I actually recognized. Calling off the wedding was the hardest phone call I ever made. Walter was angry. People were disappointed. My son thought I was letting grief decide. But I wasn't grieving anymore. I was choosing. And choosing yourself clearly and without apology is not the same as giving up. Before you sleep tonight, ask yourself these 3 things. 1. Do I understand the full legal and financial picture of what remarriage would mean for me? 2. Have I lived alone long enough to know what I actually want from a day, a week, a life? 3. Am I considering this because I want it, or because I feel I'm supposed to? Write the answers down. Honest answers. Then sleep on them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The pressure to remarry, the fear of aloneness, the opinions of well-meaning people, those are outside events. What you choose to do with your own life, your own home, your own quiet mornings, that is yours entirely. Comment from a viewer named Sandra, 67, from Portland. I watched this on a Sunday morning with coffee. I've been seeing someone for 4 months and everyone in my family is already asking when we're going to make it official. I didn't realize how much I was thinking about what I should do instead of what I want. Going to sit with that for a while. If something in this stayed with you, take a moment before you go. Not to share, not to comment, just to sit with it. That quiet you feel might be something worth listening to. I'll be here next time you want to think something through together.